All right, so I'm going to cover essentially what I talked about on Friday in this short tutorial on masks, and I'll be sure to follow up this video with any other questions that you have. But yeah, we're going to start with our original image that I showed last week. We want to cut this individual out who is going for the ball. And what we're going to start with is our quick selection brush over here on the side panel. There are a couple different options if you ever go to your side panel and then right click above any of these action items. And you can use a couple different things. These all use different variations to select objects. Our quick selection tool will probably be the quickest way, I guess, to do it. It does have the word quick in its title anyways. And once again, in general, if you're making a pretty small selection, you can just use your brush right here and drag it across. But we want to select a subject, and Photoshop already has the AI to do that, so we don't have to spend a lot of our time kind of making sure that we are changing our brush size and going back and forth. So we're just going to deselect that by hitting Control D and moving up here to our Select Subject button in the top panel. And so we're going to hit that, and the computer's going to think a little bit about where the subject is. And as you can see here, we pick up both of our subjects in the foreground. Sometimes you'll even get people in the background. Say if other people are spectating a game, that is perfectly okay because you can choose to deselect those people by hitting Alt or Option on your keyboard while you are applying your brush. I really want to make my brush quite large right now because I'm going to be clearing out this entire selection right here. So I am going to hold down Alt to adjust my brush size and then right click and drag to the right, and that will increase the size of my brush. And then I will once again hold down Alt to then subtract from my selection. Bing, bada boom. We're clearing all that way, and we want to make sure that there are no remaining dashed pixels animating right here. If you see any, some can kind of sneak by. And if you make that mask after and you still see kind of particles sticking out, you can easily clear those away by painting over them with our brush tool in a second. So as you can see right here, just like last week, we didn't select everything that we wanted to. The computer did a pretty good job. Sometimes shadows make it hard to define where exactly the person ends and the background begins. But simple things like this hat we can really easily fix by just kind of clicking around near it, and we don't have to really drag, and it will kind of fill in those gaps that we're looking for. Obviously right here, the hand, um, you can click and maybe it'll space out a little bit as you can see there. If we control Z, we had a better selection, so you can shrink it a little bit, click it again, and it'll usually kind of figure out where that side parameter is as it's selecting. But for now, what I want to do is actually kind of get more of this space than what we want. This might be almost too much because it's selecting this background, so I might hold down Alt to kind of delete some of the pixels around here. I don't want this sand right here, so I'm going to slowly kind of drag, and that's going to disappear. And now we're left with a relatively smaller chunk that I can paint away later once I apply my mask. So I'm pretty happy with this overall selection. As we can see down here, the fingers, there's still some grass between those fingers. That's okay. We can address that later if we want to. And then we're going to go down to our right hand taskbar down here where we have a bunch of different options. We're mainly concerned with right now using the layer mask icon, the one with the rectangle with the circle punched through it. So while your selection is currently active, as you can see through the animated dashed lines, we want to then click the mask. And by doing so, we then mask out the rest of the image. As you can see here, the selection may pick up very faint faded lines. That is because I didn't clear the selection well enough. But that's something really simple that we can fix by going over to our brush tool. Now this has a similar icon to the quick selection tool, but it is the brush tool. It is B as the shortcut, keyboard shortcut. Now right now, I'm currently on white, and as always, something really simple to remember is white paints to reveal, black paints to hide. So I actually want to be hiding these kind of faint lines right here. So I am going to hit X on my keyboard, or you can come down here and click the switching. I'm going to hit X really quick, and as you can see, that changed my foreground color to black. And I'm going to bring my brush down, just like I did before, holding Alt, and now instead of dragging to the right to make it bigger, I'm going to drag to the left to make it smaller. And as you can see here, we now have hardness in the middle category. We're currently at 0%, and you can really tell because that edge is very blurry, or you could, as we say, feathered. And what we can do to make that a harder edge when we're making sure we're painting away these lines is actually start dragging our mouse downward. And as you can see, we're slowly increasing the percentage, and the circle is slowly filling to eventually reach a no longer clouded line. Oh, I accidentally clicked away there. But we're almost all the way there. I'm going to keep dragging, and now it becomes completely encapsulated within the circle. So now we have 100% hardness. And that, as you can see, it's very faint, but we're kind of clicking away. We're cutting that out. 100% hardness is great when you want to make a really, really fine detail. But if you're working with kind of a soft edge and you don't really need to be super precise, I would recommend sticking to about an 80% hardness. So you've got a little bit of room to work with, or even like 70%. So say I want to um, paint away this edge around the hat. I'm going to shrink my brush size down, zoom in a little bit. We don't have to get super close, and that way you can kind of see we can slightly touch the edge, and a little bit of the hat might start to fade, but not a lot to the point where someone will notice what's going on. So it's a little bit of a safer edge, so you're not chopping away at everything. I'm going to kind of slowly paint around the fingers. We don't need to be super precise. Maybe a little bit down here. Um, and there's like little bits and pieces, but a lot of the time no one's going to be looking at it from this far away. They're going to see the main cutout, and that's what we're really focused on in terms of working efficiently. So we're going to get pretty close now. I'm going to shrink that brush size down pretty small, and as you can see, we can really kind of get around these corners quite well, and just kind of paint. And once again, you can get smaller. You can kind of really shrink that brush size down. You can really zoom in. But once you start to see these kind of white lines, the actual pixels in the frame come up, you're getting pretty dang close. I wouldn't really recommend trying to get any closer. Your computer might slow down because of how hard it's working to enhance the photo so much, but it really depends on what kind of application you're going towards, like I said. So that's, I'm pretty happy with that right now. That's a pretty solid cutout. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to duplicate my layer. Uh, and like I said on Friday, and what I did not do here is I should have duplicated my layer originally, but luckily I'm working with masks already, so we're working non-destructively, as I always encourage you to do. So we're going to hit Control or Command J, and we're going to duplicate our layer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer copy and bring it below here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my mask and right click on it. And I could either disable it or delete it. I'm going to delete it because I want the original um, layer to myself. So I have that original layer. And it almost looks like nothing is happening here. That we almost went back to the original. And technically we do. If we turn off this layer, it is the original image. But if I were to turn this on and then take this image away, we still have our cutout, which is really nice. I'm going to duplicate this layer one more time because I'm going to make another change to the layer below it. So Control J again. And now I'm going to hide this layer because we're not going to be using it right now. If I ever want to come back and reference it, I can. I'm going to create another mask. So we're going to go on here, click that rectangle with the circle through it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to invert the mask. And a quick way to do that is by hitting Control or Command I. So Control I. And bada bing, bada boom, we went from black to white, and now we have the ability to choose to paint where we want to reveal. And this is what I really like to do to kind of put objects in the foreground to really ground the people playing. So what I'll do right now is I want to be painting in white to reveal. So I'll hit X over here, change out, and I'm going to make the hardness almost down to, I'm thinking 0% right now because I really want a nice kind of gradient. So if I choose to put this in some sort of background texture, say smoke or just like a spike ball logo behind it, it's going to flow really nicely to it. So right now I'm going to click once and I'm going to kind of get that solid line. And I'm going to click over here while holding shift and it's going to paint across. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to do it a little more up here. Once again, click one time and then click again. And just like that, we've kind of created this nice foreground effect. I'm going to paint a little more over here, make sure it's all kind of filling in nicely. So now we have this really unique kind of look to it. And we can always kind of separate that from the user itself. And then I guess another fun aspect that we could do is we could find that ball in the original image and add it here. So I am going to hide both these layers for now, so we don't really need them. Go back to our original layer. I'm going to duplicate it one more time, Control J, hide it again, and now I'm going to look for the ball. And now I'll kind of show you one more way that you can cut things out even quicker than necessarily the quick selection tool. While this is great, it might not get the different colors or highlights or shadows of the ball. So we can always do, if we're trying to cut out something that is a basic shape, we can just use our marquee tools over here. And as you can see, we originally have the rectangle. We want to get to the ellipse tool. So we're going to go over here, we're going to right click like we always do to open up more of the control panel. And we're going to select that. And right now with marquees, you essentially click and then you draw. And it will draw any sort of ellipse that you want. If you want to make it equal, if you want to make it a circle, all you gotta do is hold shift. And then if you drew it in the wrong spot, do not worry to ever deselect from anything, which means with the quick selection, any sort of other tool, just hit Control or Command D and your selection will disappear. It will reset. You're able to reselect anything. Another way to select is to hold Alt when you're dragging. That will drag from the center of where you want. So you can do that while holding shift and you'll draw a circle. What I like to do here, I'm going to Control D to delete that, is try to figure out where the top point would be of this circle. Start over here, holding down shift, and try to get a pretty good idea. So I'm like, okay, that's a little bit outside, but I think if I stop right now and go inside the circle and kind of drag it, I'm going to be capturing the majority of that ball. Like that looks like a pretty good selection to me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go down to our mask like we always do, mask it out. As you can see, it's not a perfect selection, and we can always go back in. We can Control Z, move that around if we wanted to, but I'm pretty happy with how that looks right now. So we're just going to kind of roll with it. So we're going to turn back on our other layers. So now we've got this. And since we did separate the layers out and our ball is over here, we actually can be able to pick up the ball and move it wherever we want in frame. But it is currently on the back layer. So say we wanted to put it in front of our player. What I could do is drag this layer up on top of our player. And then boom, you just kind of got like a floating ball wherever you would want to put it, which is a really fun thing to do. And as always, something you should always do is label your layers. I tend to get sloppy sometimes and not do that. And that once you're working with about more than 10 layers, it can be really complicated. So I'm just going to quickly name these um, so we know what each of them are. And now we've got a pretty cool thing going on here. I'm going to show you one more trick of applying um, different types of I don't even know what these are called anymore, but like different color effects, I guess. So say we wanted to make the player really stand out, we could completely desaturate the foreground. So we're going to go over here is we're going to hit this half circle, uh, a new fill. It's an adjustment layer. That's what they're called. And we're going to go over here to hue and saturation. So right now, nothing's really happening. Everything is at 0. But say I wanted to completely desaturate the foreground right here that our player is standing on, I can drag the slider to the left, and as you can see, what's happening down here is we're slowly losing saturation, and that can be really interesting. And boom, we're completely grayed out. Our player is still here. They're popping out from the foreground even more now. Sometimes, you can go 100% all the way down to desaturation, but sometimes it can also work well to have kind of a subtle desaturation where you can still see a little bit of color. Say we go at about 50. Um, so people don't really notice the difference. It's a little more subtle. The same thing you can do over here with how bright. You can really darken it down or blow it out. I usually like to keep this slider pretty neutral, maybe only -10, +10 in that sort of range. And then of course we have our hue. So our hue will change the overall shade of what's happening. And that can get pretty crazy. You can also colorize it, which means everything will change that color. So as you can see here while we're changing this hue, his shoes are not changing because they are not affected by the master slider. But if we colorize it, everything is going to change. Everything. That shoe is going to be shifting color tones a lot more. But we're not going to actually do that. So we're going to go back to a solid 0, type that in. We're back to neutral. But say I desaturate this even more, and this will kind of be another trick with masks, because masks, every time you apply a layer adjustment, you're always going to have a mask over here, in case you did not know. And what we also want to do is make sure that we clip this to our layer, okay? I'll show you what that does a little bit later, but I'm currently going to show you how to kind of use this mask to your advantage to make things pop within this image. So right now, the ground is pretty much all the same color. The spike ball set is also equally saturated. So we're going to go over to our brush tool. I'm going to hit X because right now I'm painting in white and the whole layer is being applied. I actually want to hide some of that desaturation, so to go back to the original color. So essentially, right now, boom, that's what it originally looked like. This is what it looks like with the layer applied. Now what I'm going to do now is going to paint some of that layer away so that it'll pop. So as you can see, I'm going to go down to the spike ball net. I'm going to turn up my hardness just a bit. Probably going to go about 40%. And we're going to just kind of start painting. And as you can see, this thing is really kind of, it's almost like it's like glowing, like it means something. We're kind of calling attention to like what is happening over here. I mean, as you can see, it's kind of getting a little bit of the grass, and you can kind of go back through and paint over that. But maybe you kind of want that effect because like it looks like the grass is almost kind of catching some of that spike ball light. So as we zoom out, you can really see the difference. And so right now, if you're selected on your mask, the properties panel is going to show what you can do to change your mask. However, if you want to select your color range again, your hue, your saturation, merely click on the left-hand side, and you can still adjust this slider. So we can desaturate it even more. That contrast becomes even more apparent. Or we could make it really, really saturated, and the net's actually going to stay the same color as the original picture. So we're going to go back down, drop that at about, 60, right around there. And now what we can do is I can show you what clipping a layer adjustment to another layer, why that matters. So say I go up to the ball right here, and I want to adjust the saturation again. And I really, really, really want to make it bright. So if I go here, as you can see, everything in this image is becoming really, really saturated. It's not just the ball. So what we want to do is we want to drop down here, and as you can see, it says this adjustment affects all layers below. So that's currently what's happening. And it says click, let's just pull that up one more time. click to clip to layer. So if we click right now, boom, everything below us, the player, the foreground, they all go back to their original state. And right now, it's very subtle since it's only the ball, but the ball is the only one being affected by this extreme saturation. So if we turn that off real quick, that's what the ball looked like before, but now we can see that. So say you wanted to do this to the player and you didn't want it to do it to the ball, you could actually drag this down. However, when you do drag it down, it will no longer clip. You have to re-clip it every time you drag it away. So you could always do this, but say that you don't have your panel open and you're just trying to be really quick and efficient. If you hover between the layer right along this line while holding Alt, you're going to see this little down arrow and the white box that is to clip to. So we're going to clip it just to our player. We go back to our desaturated foreground, and now I'm going to click here. I'm going to double click to bring it up again. And I'm going to kind of play around with, okay, how saturated do I really want to make this person? Like maybe I kind of want to desaturate them a little. What I did for my original poster in the 2020 graphic is I actually desaturated the players quite a lot. And then by using masks, I actually want to hide some of that desaturation and have some colors pop. And you can really just see the difference of like, wow, that shirt, you can really make it pop just by kind of turning down some of the power of the colors around it. And this can be really helpful for calling out some specific color or action that's happening. So like if we wanted to call out all the yellow in here, maybe I would, okay, I don't want to paint out the shirt. I instead want to paint out the spike ball yellow in her hat. So we're going to zoom in on that and we're going to kind of paint that, and that's going to pop a little more. And it might be kind of subtle because it's really small, but that's what matters, is that we're trying to kind of create this sequence of color highlighting and to try draw the eye of the user around the image and kind of find the theme of it. So yeah, that is a quick tutorial on masks. If you want to see other things masked out, masks work for everything. You can mask out text, you can mask out shapes, anything that you want can essentially be applied using a mask in the bottom right hand over here. I hope you enjoyed, and please let me know if you have any other questions. Thank you.